Princess Lyrelii of the Velthera Empire stood at the massive viewing port of her flagship, watching the blue-green world of Earth grow larger in the crystalline display. Her silver skin gleamed under the ship's bioluminescent lighting, and her forearms moved gracefully as she adjusted her ceremonial armor. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders like the gravity of a dying star. "Your Highness," came the melodic voice of Commander Zephys behind her. "The human delegation has confirmed their acceptance of the marriage proposal. The ceremony will proceed as planned." Lyrelii's primary hands clenched into fists while her secondary arms remained steady at her sides. 300 years of war between the Velthera Empire and humanity had brought nothing but death and destruction to both sides. The humans, despite being considered a primitive species by galactic standards, had proven surprisingly resilient. Their technology was crude, their lifespans pathetically short, yet somehow they continued to resist the might of an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. "Tell me about him again," she said without turning from the viewport. Zephys approached carefully, his own forearms carrying a holographic display unit. "Captain Marcus Chen, aged 32 standard Terran years. Former commander of the human vessel Prometheus before its destruction at the Battle of Kepler 442. Currently serving as a strategic advisor to the Terran Defense Council. Military records indicate he's responsible for several unexpected victories against our forces." The hologram flickered to life, showing a tall human male with dark hair and intense brown eyes. Scars marked his face and hands, evidence of the brutal conflicts he'd survived. Lyrelii studied his features carefully, trying to understand what made this particular human worthy of being chosen as her husband in this desperate bid for peace. "He doesn't look like much," she murmured. "No enhanced physiology, no extended lifespan, no psychic abilities. How did such a creature become significant enough to warrant marriage to an imperial princess? The reports are disturbing, Your Highness. Captain Chen has displayed tactical capabilities that our analysts struggle to explain. His victory at the Vale Nebula resulted in the destruction of 3 of our dreadnoughts using only a small flotilla of human vessels. The battle recordings show maneuvers that should have been impossible for someone of his species." Lyrelii finally turned to face her commander. At nearly 8 feet tall, she towered over most beings in the galaxy, her elongated limbs and graceful movements marking her as a member of the Velthera nobility. Her people had ruled the stars for millennia, their superior intellect and natural psychic abilities making them natural leaders among the lesser races. "Impossible how?" she asked. Zephys hesitated before activating another section of the hologram. Battle footage began playing, showing human ships moving in patterns that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Instead of the careful, calculated maneuvers preferred by most species, the human vessels moved with wild, almost reckless precision. They darted between asteroid fields, used gravitational slingshots in ways that should have torn their ships apart, and coordinated attacks with split-second timing that suggested near telepathic communication. "Watch the sequence," Zephys said, highlighting a particular moment in the battle. "Captain Chen's flagship, the Defiance, approaches our battle line at maximum acceleration. According to our sensors, the G-forces should have liquefied every human aboard. Yet somehow, they not only survived but executed a perfect attack run that crippled our command vessel." Lyrelii watched in silence as the human ship performed maneuvers that made her stomach clench with sympathetic motion sickness. The humans were pulling forces that would kill most species, yet they continued fighting with apparent ease. "There must be some explanation," she said. "Hidden technology, perhaps? Genetic modifications we're not aware of? Our intelligence suggests otherwise, Princess. The humans appear to be exactly what they claim to be, an unmodified species that evolved on a high-gravity death world. Their planet's environmental conditions have apparently produced beings capable of withstanding physical stresses that would incapacitate more civilized races." The journey to Earth took another 3 days, during which Lyrelii found herself repeatedly reviewing the intelligence files on her future husband. Marcus Chen had been born on Earth's western continent, in a region called California. His early life had been unremarkable by human standards: education in their military academies, service aboard various vessels, steady promotion through their naval hierarchy. What made him extraordinary was his combat record. In every engagement against Velthera forces, Chen had found ways to turn human disadvantages into strategic advantages. When faced with superior firepower, he used stealth and misdirection. When outmaneuvered, he employed tactics so aggressive they bordered on suicidal. Yet somehow, he and his crews survived encounters that should have been massacres. The most troubling incident had occurred during the siege of New Geneva. Chen's small task force had been trapped by a full Veilthera battle group, outnumbered 20-1. Instead of surrendering or attempting to escape, Chen had done the unthinkable. He'd ordered his ships to ram the Veilthera vessels at maximum velocity. The humans had converted their own ships into kinetic weapons, sacrificing themselves to take down enemy vessels in exchanges that no rational being would consider acceptable. Except they'd won. Against impossible odds, Chen's desperate gambit had broken the siege and saved the human colony. The psychological impact on Veilthera forces had been devastating. How could they fight an enemy that treated their own lives so casually? How could they predict the actions of beings who considered death an acceptable tactical option? Your Highness, Zephys interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting permission to escort us to Earth. Lyralii activated the communication system, and the main display filled with the image of a human bridge. The beings manning the stations looked impossibly small and fragile compared to Veilthera standards, yet their movements showed the precision and discipline of experienced warriors. Princess Lyralii, came a voice from offscreen. I am Admiral Sarah Richardson, commander of the Terran Home Fleet. On behalf of the Terran Defense Council, I welcome you to our system. We're prepared to provide escort to Earth orbit. Your courtesy is appreciated, Admiral, Lyralii replied in carefully practiced Terran standard. I trust Captain Chen will be present for the ceremony? There was a slight pause before Richardson responded. Captain Chen is eager to meet his intended bride, Your Highness. I should warn you that he's been somewhat difficult to manage since learning of the arrangement. He has strong opinions about arranged marriages. Lyralii felt a flutter of unease. The marriage had been negotiated between governments, a political alliance designed to end centuries of warfare. Neither she nor Chen had been consulted about their personal preferences. For someone of her station, such arrangements were common and expected. Apparently, humans had different customs. I see. Will this present problems for the ceremony? Captain Chen is a soldier, Princess. He understands duty and sacrifice. He'll honor the agreement, but he may not be enthusiastic about it. The escort formation that met them was unlike anything Lyralii had seen before. Instead of the formal, parade ground precision she expected, the human ships moved in loose, organic patterns that seemed almost random. Yet as they drew closer to Earth, she began to recognize the subtle intelligence behind their positioning. Each vessel was positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining maximum maneuverability. It was a formation designed for instant transition from peaceful escort to combat engagement. Earth itself was a revelation. Lyralii had read the reports describing humanity's homeworld, but seeing it firsthand was startling. The planet was a swirling mass of blue oceans and white clouds, with continents that showed clear signs of industrial civilization. What struck her most was how alive it looked compared to the carefully managed worlds of the Empire. Veilthera planets were perfected, their environments controlled and optimized for maximum efficiency. Earth looked wild, chaotic, and somehow vital in a way that made her feel both fascinated and slightly uncomfortable. As their ships entered orbit, Admiral Richardson's voice came over the communication system again. Princess, we've prepared quarters for you aboard Orbital Station Harmony. Captain Chen will meet you there for the pre-ceremony briefings. The station was another example of human engineering philosophy. Where Veilthera construction emphasized elegant curves and bioluminescent materials, the human station was all angles and harsh lighting. It looked like it had been built for function rather than beauty, with obvious weapon emplacements and armor plating that suggested it doubled as a fortress. Lyralii's escort consisted of 12 of her personal guard, elite Veilthera warriors who had served her family for decades. As they docked with the human station, she could see her guards' discomfort at entering such crude facilities. The corridors were narrow by their standards, the artificial gravity set to Earth normal rather than the lighter conditions preferred by her people. Remember, she told her guards as they prepared to disembark, we are here as guests and diplomats. These humans may be primitive, but they've proven themselves capable of inflicting serious damage when provoked. Maintain dignity but avoid unnecessary offense. The human delegation waiting to greet them was smaller than expected, only 6 individuals instead of the formal reception committee she'd anticipated. Admiral Richardson was present, along with several other officers whose rank insignia Lyralii couldn't immediately identify. They stood at attention as she approached, their small frames dwarfed by her guards but showing no signs of intimidation. Princess Lyralii, Admiral Richardson said, offering a formal salute.
Welcome to Harmony Station. Allow me to present your intended husband, Captain Marcus Chen.
The man who stepped forward matched his holographic image, but somehow seemed more substantial in person. He was smaller than she'd expected, most humans were, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested coiled strength. His dark eyes met hers without flinching, and she noticed his hands bore fresh scars that hadn't been visible in the intelligence photos. Your Highness, he said, offering a slight bow that managed to be respectful without being subservient.
I hope your journey was comfortable.
His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with an accent that her linguistic training identified as North American English. More importantly, there was no fear in his tone. Most beings meeting Veilthera royalty for the first time showed at least some nervousness. Chen spoke to her as he might address any fellow officer. Captain Chen, she replied, studying his face for some hint of what lay beneath the calm exterior.
I trust you understand the significance of our union?
I understand it's meant to end a war that's cost both our peoples more than we can afford to lose, he said simply. Beyond that, I'm still learning about Veilthera customs and expectations.
Admiral Richardson cleared her throat diplomatically.
Perhaps we should proceed to the briefing room? There are several protocols to review before tomorrow's ceremony. As they walked through the station's corridors, Lyralii found herself watching Chen's movements. Like most humans, he was compact and efficient, but she noticed how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, cataloging exits and potential threats with the instincts of a born warrior.
When they passed a viewport showing Earth below, she saw his gaze linger on the planet with an expression she couldn't quite identify.
Is that longing I see, Captain? She asked quietly. He glanced at her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten she was watching him. Perhaps.
It's been 18 months since I was last planetside. This assignment has kept me in space longer than I'd prefer.
You miss your world? I miss breathing air that doesn't taste like recycled filters and feeling ground that doesn't vibrate with engine harmonics, he said with a slight smile.
Simple pleasures, Your Highness. The briefing room was another example of human practicality over aesthetics.
A large table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs that had clearly been hastily modified to accommodate Veilthera physiology. Wall displays showed star charts, ship positions, and what appeared to be tentative peace treaty provisions. The ceremony itself will be broadcast across both our territories, Admiral Richardson explained as they settled into their seats.
A symbolic gesture showing that former enemies can become allies.
The specific rituals have been negotiated between our diplomatic corps and yours. Captain Chen leaned forward, his expression serious.
I need to understand something, Princess. This marriage, is it purely ceremonial, or are there other expectations?
Lyralii felt heat rise in her cheeks, a Veilthera physiological response equivalent to human blushing. The question was blunt in a way that her diplomatic training hadn't prepared her for. The marriage serves political purposes, she said carefully.
Personal arrangements between spouses are traditionally negotiated privately. I see. Chen sat back, apparently satisfied with her diplomatic non-answer. And, after the ceremony? Do we maintain separate lives, or is there an expectation of cohabitation? Admiral Richardson shifted uncomfortably.
Perhaps these details should be worked out between the two of you in private? No, Chen said firmly.
If this is going to work, we need clear understandings from the beginning.
I won't pretend to love someone I've just met, and I won't expect her to pretend to love me. But, if we're going to be married, even for political reasons, we need to establish ground rules for how we interact. Lyralii found herself impressed despite her reservations.
Most beings, when faced with marriage to imperial royalty, either groveled for favor or sulked about their fate.
Chen was approaching it like any other military operation: identify objectives, assess resources, establish parameters for success.
A practical approach, she said. Very well.
I propose we begin with honest assessment of our situation.
We're both soldiers who understand duty. We've been ordered into this arrangement for the good of our respective peoples.
Neither of us chose this, but we're both capable of making it work.
Chen nodded slowly. Agreed.
I won't pretend this is ideal, but I've had worse assignments.
At least you seem intelligent enough to have a conversation with. Admiral Richardson looked like she wanted to sink through the floor at Chen's casual disrespect, but Lyralei found herself almost smiling. When was the last time anyone had spoken to her with such refreshing directness? Indeed. I've read your service record, Captain. Your tactical capabilities are impressive for someone of your species. Careful, Princess, he said with a slight grin. Comments like that could be taken as either compliments or insults, depending on your tone. How should I have meant it? That remains to be seen. Why don't you tell me what you know about human combat doctrine, and I'll tell you what I know about Veilthera military philosophy. Might help us understand each other better. For the next several hours, they discussed strategy and tactics with the intensity of two professionals sharing expertise. Lyralei found herself genuinely engaged for the first time in months. Chen's insights into human military thinking revealed a level of sophistication that challenged her assumptions about his species. Your people fight like you have nothing to lose, she observed at one point. Sometimes that's exactly the case, he replied seriously. When you're facing extinction, conventional wisdom becomes irrelevant. You do whatever it takes to survive. Even if it means sacrificing yourselves? Especially then. A tactical defeat that saves your home planet is still a strategic victory. Your people haven't figured that out yet. As the evening progressed, Lyralei realized she was looking forward to continuing their conversation. Whatever else this marriage might become, at least it wouldn't be boring. The ceremony was scheduled for the following afternoon, with representatives from dozens of species attending via holographic transmission. As she prepared for sleep in her assigned quarters, Lyralei reflected on her first impressions of her intended husband. Marcus Chen was nothing like what she'd expected. He was intelligent without being arrogant, respectful without being subservient, and possessed of a directness that was both refreshing and slightly alarming. Most importantly, he showed no signs of being intimidated by her status or species. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in both their lives. As she settled into the narrow human-designed bed, Lyralei found herself curious about what that chapter might contain. For the first time since accepting this assignment, she felt something other than resigned duty. She felt anticipation. The wedding ceremony took place in Harmony Station's main assembly hall, hastily converted into something resembling both Veilthera and human ceremonial traditions. Crystalline formations from the Empire's core worlds created shifting patterns of light across the walls, while earthflowers provided splashes of organic color that seemed almost alien to Lyralei's eyes. Representatives from 47 different species attended via holographic projection, their varied forms filling the hall with a rainbow of alien physiologies. The Centaurian Trade Federation had sent their ambassador, a being that looked like a cross between a spider and a tree. The crystalline Zephyrians manifested as geometric patterns of pure energy. Even the reclusive Voidwalkers had sent a representative, though it appeared only as a shifting shadow that hurt to look at directly. Lyralei stood at the altar wearing traditional Veilthera ceremonial armor, its bioluminescent circuits creating patterns of silver and blue across her tall frame. Across from her, Marcus Chen wore what she'd learned was a human military dress uniform, dark blue fabric with gold braiding that emphasized his compact build. Despite the formal setting, his eyes continued their constant surveillance of the room, noting exits and potential threats with professional instincts. The ceremony itself was a carefully negotiated blend of both cultures. Veilthera tradition required the recitation of genealogies dating back 12 generations, while human custom demanded an exchange of personal vows. The result was a lengthy ritual that tested everyone's patience. Princess Lyralei of House Thanarian, daughter of Empress Ciliana the Wise, granddaughter of Emperor Kelvin the Conqueror. The recitation of her lineage continued for nearly 20 minutes, each ancestor's achievements catalogued in formal High Veilthera. Chen listened with apparent interest, though she suspected he understood little of the complex ceremonial language. When it came time for the human portion, Chen's vows were refreshingly brief and direct. I, Marcus Chen, take you, Lyralei, as my wife in the hope that our union brings peace to both our peoples and understanding between former enemies. I promise to treat you with respect, to defend you as I would any comrade in arms, and to work with you toward a future where our children don't inherit the hatred of our parents. The simplicity of his words contrasted sharply with the elaborate Veilthera ceremony, yet somehow they carried more emotional weight than all the ancient rituals combined. When he spoke of children, Lyralei felt a strange flutter in her chest that she couldn't quite identify. The exchange of gifts followed next. Lyralei presented Chen with a ceremonial blade forged from metal taken from the core of her homeworld, a weapon that could cut through most known materials and
would never dull or break. Chen's gift to her was more modest but somehow more personal, a small pendant made from metal taken from his destroyed ship, the Prometheus. "It's not much to look at," he said quietly as he fastened it around her neck with his rough human hands. "But that metal survived the destruction of my ship and the death of my crew." It seemed appropriate that it survived this ceremony too. Admiral Richardson officiated the final binding ritual, speaking words that would be transmitted across the galaxy as proof that the war between humanity and the Veilthera Empire had officially ended. As their hands joined in the symbolic gesture of unity, Lyralii noticed that Chen's palm was calloused from years of handling weapons and ship controls. Her own hands, enhanced by Veilthera genetics and pampered by royal privilege, seemed soft and weak by comparison. The reception that followed was a diplomatic nightmare disguised as a celebration. Representatives from dozens of species mingled awkwardly, their different environmental needs requiring complex atmospheric controls and specialized seating arrangements. The aquatic delegation floated in mobile water tanks, while the silicon-based lithoids required heated platforms to prevent their crystalline bodies from cracking in the cooler temperatures preferred by most carbon-based lifeforms. "Quite a collection of galaxy's finest," Chen murmured to Lyralii as they circulated among their guests. "Half of these species have been at war with each other at some point in the last century." "Welcome to galactic diplomacy," she replied. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend, until they become inconvenient. Then, they become enemies again." Sounds familiar. Humans have a similar philosophy, though we're usually more direct about it. They were interrupted by the approach of Ambassador Vexthan of the Hegemony, a reptilian species known for their aggressive expansion policies and casual disregard for the sovereignty of smaller worlds. The ambassador's scales were a brilliant green that indicated high social status among his people, and his multiple eyes focused on them with predatory intensity. "Princess Lyralii," he hissed in barely adequate galactic standard. "How interesting to see the mighty Veilthera Empire reduced to making alliances with such primitive creatures. I trust this arrangement will prove more beneficial than your recent military campaigns?" Lyralii felt Chen tense beside her, though his expression remained neutral. She was about to deliver the sort of diplomatic response her training had prepared her for when Chen spoke instead. "Ambassador Vexthan," he said pleasantly. "I understand the Hegemony has had some recent difficulties with human merchant vessels in the Outer Rim. Something about your patrol ships being unable to catch them?" The ambassador's scale shifted to a darker shade of green, a sign of anger among his species. "Human smugglers have been violating our territorial boundaries. When we catch them, they will face appropriate punishment." "I'm sure they will," Chen agreed. "Of course, catching them seems to be the challenge. Human ships are built for speed and maneuverability rather than the heavy armor your people prefer. Different philosophies of ship design, you might say. Are you suggesting that hegemony vessels are inferior to human craft?" "Not at all," Chen said with apparent sincerity. "I'm simply noting that every species develops technology based on their particular needs and capabilities. The hegemony builds ships for conquest and intimidation. Humans build ships for survival and escape. Both serve their intended purposes." Lyralii watched the exchange with fascination. Chen was being perfectly polite while simultaneously insulting the ambassador's military capabilities and implying that humans were too clever to be caught by hegemony forces. The subtle aggression reminded her of watching two predators circle each other before a fight. Ambassador Vexthan's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps Captain Chen would be interested in a friendly wager? The hegemony maintains a small patrol fleet in this system for ceremonial purposes. A simple race between one of our vessels and a human ship might settle the question of relative capabilities." "I appreciate the offer," Chen replied, "but I'm not currently in command of a combat vessel." "Perhaps another time?" Actually, Admiral Richardson interrupted, appearing at Chen's shoulder. The Defiance II was just completed at Luna shipyards. "Your new command is ready for shakedown trials whenever you're available, Captain." Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is it now? How convenient." Lyralii realized she was witnessing the sort of careful political maneuvering that started wars or prevented them, depending on the skill of the participants. The hegemony was testing human resolve in front of representatives from dozens of species. A show of weakness here could encourage aggressive actions throughout the galaxy. But an overly aggressive response could shatter the fragile peace they'd just sworn to protect. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "this would be an excellent opportunity for the galaxy to witness the cooperation between former enemies."
Captain Chen representing human capabilities, while I observe from a Veilthra vessel to ensure fair competition? Ambassador Vex then looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant.
He'd intended to create a situation where humans would either back down and appear weak, or participate and potentially suffer a humiliating defeat. Lyreliai's suggestion transformed it into a demonstration of human Veilthra cooperation while putting pressure on the hegemony to prove their supposed superiority.
An excellent suggestion, Admiral Richardson agreed. I'm sure Captain Chen would welcome the chance to test his new ship's capabilities.
Of course,
Chen said smoothly. Ambassador, shall we say tomorrow at 0800 hours?
A simple course through the asteroid field near Jupiter should provide adequate challenge for both vessels.
Agreed, the ambassador hissed, his scales now showing flashes of orange that indicated excitement. The galaxy will see which species truly deserves to claim dominance in space.
As the ambassador moved away, Chen turned to Lyreliai with a questioning look.
I hope you know what you just committed us to, Princess. The Defiance 2 is untested, and I've never worked with a Veilthra observation crew before. Consider it our first joint operation as husband and wife, she said.
Besides, I'm curious to see these legendary human tactics in action.
Careful what you wish for.
Human tactics tend to be exciting in ways that most species find deeply uncomfortable. The next morning found them aboard the newly christened Defiance 2, a sleek human cruiser that represented the latest in Terran military technology. The ship was smaller than most Veilthra vessels but built with the same philosophy that characterized all human engineering: compact, efficient, and designed to absorb tremendous punishment while maintaining combat effectiveness. Lyreliai stood on the bridge wearing a specially designed environmental suit that would protect her from the crushing acceleration forces that human ships routinely employed.
Chen had insisted on the precaution after explaining that standard human combat maneuvers would likely kill unprotected Veilthra personnel.
Your ship's gravity compensation is inadequate by our standards, she'd observed during the pre-flight briefing.
We've learned to live with it, Chen replied. Sometimes the ability to outmaneuver an enemy is worth a little discomfort.
The hegemony vessel that awaited them at the starting point was a massive dreadnought called the Bone Crusher, armed with enough firepower to level a small moon. It dwarfed the Defiance 2 by a factor of 10, its heavy armor and weapon arrays making it look like a flying fortress.
Impressive, Chen commented as they approached the starting line.
Lots of guns, thick armor, powerful engines. Everything you'd want in a ship designed to intimidate smaller vessels into submission.
You don't sound concerned, Lyreliai observed. Should I be?
It's big and scary looking, but so was the last hegemony ship I tangled with.
They all share the same weakness: they're built for straight-line combat against opponents who fight by the same rules they do.
The racecourse was a complex route through Jupiter's asteroid field, with checkpoints that required precision navigation while maintaining high speed. The finish line lay on the far side of the largest asteroid cluster, approximately 2 million kilometers from the starting point.
Ambassador Vexthan's voice crackled over the communication system. Competitors will proceed through the designated course without weapons fire or interference with the other vessel. First ship to reach the final checkpoint wins. Are both captains ready? Defiance 2, ready, Chen replied. Bone Crusher, ready, came the response from the hegemony captain. Begin.
Both ships accelerated from the starting line, but the differences in their approaches became apparent immediately. The Bone Crusher followed a direct route through the asteroid field, using its powerful engines to blast through the smaller obstacles while carefully navigating around the larger ones. It was an impressive display of raw power and precise ship handling.
The Defiance 2 took a completely different approach. Instead of fighting the asteroid field, Chen used it. The human ship dove into the densest part of the debris field, skipping between tumbling rocks with maneuvers that made Lyreliai's stomach lurch despite her protective suit.
Captain, his navigator called out, we're pulling 12 Gs on some of these turns.
Recommend reducing speed for safety margins.
Negative, Chen replied calmly.
Maintain current acceleration. Plot a course through the dense cluster ahead. I want to use the gravitational anomalies from those metallic asteroids.
Lyreliai watched in fascination as the human crew worked with mechanical precision despite the crushing forces that would have incapacitated most species. Chen stood at the center of the bridge, his hands gripping the tactical display while his eyes tracked dozens of variables simultaneously. This was what the intelligence reports had tried to describe: humans functioning at performance levels that seemed impossible for biological entities.
There, Chen said, pointing at a cluster of asteroids ahead.
The three large ones are iron core fragments from a shattered moon.
Their combined gravitational field creates a slingshot opportunity if we hit it at exactly the right angle. Captain, his helmsman said nervously, the window for that maneuver is less than 2 seconds. If we miss the entry angle, we'll be paced on an asteroid wall, I know. Execute the maneuver.
The Defiance 2 dove toward the asteroid cluster at an angle that seemed suicidal.
I watched the tactical display as they threaded between massive chunks of rock, using the combined gravitational pull to whip around the cluster at incredible velocity. For a moment that felt like eternity, they were completely out of control, falling through space while trusting in mathematics and momentum to carry them safely through. Then, they shot out the other side of the cluster like a bullet from a gun, their velocity increased by nearly 30% from the gravitational assist. The maneuver had cut several minutes off their transit time and put them well ahead of the Bone Crusher's more conservative route. Impossible, came Ambassador Vexton's voice over the comm system. No biological crew could survive those acceleration forces.
Apparently someone forgot to tell us that, Chen replied cheerfully.
Defiance 2 to Bone Crusher, you're falling behind. Are your engines malfunctioning? The insult had the desired effect.
The hegemony captain pushed his massive ship harder, trying to make up the lost time through brute force acceleration. But, the Bone Crusher's greater mass worked against it in the asteroid field, forcing the crew to take longer, safer routes around obstacles that the nimble human ship could slip between.
He's making a mistake, I observed, watching the hegemony ship's increasingly erratic course corrections.
Yes, he is, Chen agreed.
Pride makes people do stupid things.
He's pushing that ship beyond its design parameters, trying to match our maneuverability.
As if summoned by Chen's words, alarms began sounding from the hegemony vessel.
The Bone Crusher had clipped a medium-sized asteroid during an overly aggressive turn, damaging its port engine array and causing it to fall even further behind.
Bone Crusher, this is Defiance 2, Chen called over the comm. Do you require assistance? The response was a string of untranslatable hegemony curses that required no interpretation.
The Defiance 2 crossed the finish line nearly 8 minutes ahead of the damaged hegemony vessel, having completed the course in less than half the time most ships would have required.
As they slowed to normal velocity, I finally understood what made humans such dangerous opponents. Your people fight like you're already dead, she said to Chen as the crew secured from racing stations.
Sometimes that's the only way to stay alive, he replied. Fear of death makes you hesitate, and hesitation gets you killed. Better to accept that death is always possible and focus on completing the mission.
Is that how you survived the siege of New Geneva? By accepting death?
Chen was quiet for a moment, his expression growing distant.
New Geneva was different.
We weren't trying to survive, we were trying to buy time for the civilian evacuation ships.
Sometimes the mission is more important than the people carrying it out. Your crew followed you into certain death?
My crew understood the stakes. 80,000 civilians, including children, were depending on us to hold the line long enough for them to escape. When those are the numbers, personal survival becomes irrelevant.
I studied her new husband's face, seeing something in his expression that her diplomatic training couldn't quite categorize. It wasn't madness or reckless disregard for life.
It was something else entirely, a cold calculation that weighed lives like tactical assets and made decisions based on mathematics rather than emotion.
How many of your crew survived New Geneva? She asked quietly.
Out of 237 personnel across 4 ships? Chen met her eyes directly.
12. Including me.
The number hit her like a physical blow. No wonder the Veilthera military struggled to understand human tactics.
What army could function when officers routinely led 95% of their forces to death? What species produced warriors willing to follow such leaders?
The 12 survivors, she said.
Are they still serving under you?
3 of them.
The others were too badly injured to return to active duty.
I make sure they're taken care of, pensions, medical support, whatever they need.
It's the least I can do.
As they returned to Harmony Station, I found herself seeing her new husband in a completely different light.
She'd married a being who commanded absolute loyalty from subordinates he'd led into near certain death.
A tactical genius who calculated acceptable losses with mathematical precision while somehow maintaining the personal connections that made soldiers willing to die for him.
The reception that evening was markedly different from the previous night's diplomatic formalities.
Word of the racing victory had spread throughout the station, and the atmosphere was charged with speculation about what this demonstration of human capabilities might mean for galactic politics.
Ambassador Vex then approached them again, his scales now showing the purple coloration that indicated deep respect among his people.
Captain Chen, he said formally, the hegemony acknowledges your superior ship handling.
Perhaps we have underestimated human capabilities in the past.
Perhaps, Chen agreed diplomatically. I hope this demonstration helps prevent future misunderstandings between our peoples.
But, I noticed how the other alien representatives watched Chen now.
Where before they'd seen a primitive human unworthy of serious consideration, they now saw something else, a warrior whose capabilities demanded respect. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted, and everyone present understood the implications. Late that evening, as the formal celebrations wound down, I found herself alone with Chen in the observation lounge overlooking Earth. The planet turned slowly below them, its surface lit by the glow of human cities and the aurora caused by interaction with its magnetic field.
Regrets? Chen asked, joining her at the viewport. About the marriage? No, I don't think so. About the future?
Perhaps.
Today showed me that humans are far more dangerous than our intelligence reports suggested. That makes you either very valuable allies or very dangerous enemies. Which do you think we'll be?
I considered the question seriously. I think that depends on how we're treated. Humans seem to respond well to respect and poorly to condescension.
Most galactic powers will struggle with that distinction. And the Velthora Empire?
The Velthora Empire just gained a son-in-law who can outfly hegemony dreadnoughts in an untested ship.
I suspect my mother will be very interested in meeting you.
Chen's expression grew thoughtful.
Should I be worried about that?
Probably.
Empress Celiana doesn't usually take interest in individuals unless she has plans for them.
As they stood together watching the stars, I realized that her arranged marriage had become something far more complex than a simple diplomatic alliance. She'd married a human who might be the most dangerous individual she'd ever met, and tomorrow they would have to navigate the political implications of that fact. The war between their peoples had ended, but I suspected that their personal challenges were just beginning. 3 months after their wedding, I stood in the command center of Velthora Prime, the Empire's capital world, watching her mother pace with the predatory grace of a hunting cat. Empress Celiana was nearly 9 feet tall even by Velthora standards, her forearms moving in complex gestures that indicated deep thought and growing irritation.
Explain to me again, the Empress said in High Velthora, how a single human ship managed to destroy an entire Zephyrian pirate fleet without taking damage?
The holographic display in the center of the room showed the aftermath of what military analysts were already calling the Kepler Station incident. 17 pirate vessels, all of them fast attack craft built for hit-and-run operations, had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. In the center of the destruction field sat the Defiance II, its hull unmarked and its crew apparently unharmed. According to witness reports, Admiral Kethvar reported nervously, Captain Chen's ship was escorting a merchant convoy when the pirates attempted to seize the cargo vessels.
The human vessel engaged all 17 attackers simultaneously.
Simultaneously, the Empress repeated slowly. 1 ship against 17.
And Chen's tactical approach?
He used the merchant vessels as cover while picking off the pirates one by one.
The witnesses describe it as the most precise display of ship-to-ship combat they'd ever seen.
Chen's gunners hit critical systems on each pirate craft with surgical precision, disabling them before delivering killing shots. I watched her mother's expression carefully. The Empress had been following Marcus's activities with growing interest ever since the racing incident at Jupiter. Every report of his tactical innovations, every impossible victory, every demonstration of human military capabilities was catalogued and analyzed by the Empire's best strategic minds.
Where is the captain now? Celiana asked. En route to Velthora Prime with the convoy, I answered. He should arrive within the next standard day.
The Empress turned to study her daughter, those ancient eyes seeming to look directly through her skull into her thoughts.
And, what is your assessment of your husband's capabilities, daughter? I had been dreading this question.
3 months of marriage to Marcus Chen had revealed depths to the human that she was still trying to understand. He was brilliant, certainly, with a tactical mind that operated on levels that challenged even Velthora's strategic doctrine. But there was something else, something darker and more complex that made her simultaneously fascinated and nervous.
He's unlike anyone I've ever met, she said carefully. His approach to warfare is fundamentally different from ours. We fight to achieve strategic objectives with minimal losses.
He fights to win, regardless of cost.
Elaborate.
During the Kepler station engagement, he used tactics that put the merchant vessels at risk to achieve optimal firing positions. Any other commander would have prioritized protecting the civilian ships. Chen calculated that the risk to the merchants was acceptable if it allowed him to eliminate the pirates more quickly.
And the merchants survived?
Yes, but only because his calculations were correct. If he'd been wrong, dozens of civilians would have died.
Empress Celiana moved to the large viewport that dominated one wall of the command center.
Beyond the reinforced crystal, the sprawling cityscape of Valethra Prime stretched to the horizon, its bioluminescent towers pulsing with the rhythms of the planet's artificial day cycle. The capital world housed nearly 3 billion beings from across the empire, all of them ultimately dependent on the wisdom and strength of the royal family for their protection.
The hegemony has been mobilizing fleets along our border, the Empress said without turning around. Ambassador Vexthan's humiliation at Jupiter has apparently convinced his government that humans represent a significant threat to galactic stability. Are they planning an attack? Intelligence suggests they're considering a preemptive strike against Earth.
The theory being that eliminating humanity now will prevent them from becoming a larger problem later. Lyrelii felt cold dread settle in her stomach.
That would violate the peace treaty. It would restart the war. Only if we chose to honor our alliance with humanity.
The treaty requires mutual defense, but there are always ways to reinterpret such agreements when circumstances change.
Mother, you can't be serious. The marriage alliance was your idea. You personally negotiated the terms.
Empress Celiana finally turned to face her daughter, and Lyrelii saw something in her expression that she'd never seen before: uncertainty. The most powerful being in the galaxy was questioning her own decisions. I negotiated an alliance with what I believed was a primitive but resourceful species that might serve as useful allies against our traditional enemies.
What I'm discovering is that humans may be the most dangerous warriors the galaxy has ever produced.
That changes the strategic calculus considerably.
You're afraid of them. I'm concerned about them. There's a difference.
Fear clouds judgment, but concern promotes careful planning. The question is whether humanity will be content to remain a minor regional power or whether they'll eventually seek to expand their influence.
Have you asked Marcus what he thinks? That's exactly what I intend to do. Your husband is about to receive an invitation to address the Imperial War Council.
I want to hear his analysis of human strategic intentions directly from someone in a position to know. The invitation, when it came, was phrased in the formal language of imperial diplomacy, but Marcus understood its true meaning immediately. He was being summoned for interrogation by the most powerful military minds in the galaxy, and his answers would determine whether humanity remained an ally or became a target for elimination. Should I be worried? He asked Lyrelii as they prepared for the journey to the Imperial Palace.
Probably, she admitted. My mother doesn't usually involve herself in military planning unless she's considering major strategic changes.
The fact that she wants to speak with you personally suggests she's evaluating whether the alliance with humanity is still beneficial for the Empire.
They traveled to the palace in Lyrelii's personal transport, a sleek vessel that demonstrated Valethra mastery of biomechanical engineering.
The ship's hull was actually a living organism, capable of self-repair and adaptation to different environmental conditions. Marcus found it both fascinating and slightly disturbing to travel inside what was essentially a flying animal. Your people's technology is impressive, he observed as they approached the landing pad. But it raises questions about where the boundary lies between tool and creature.
For us, there is no boundary, Lyrelii explained. We believe that the distinction between living and non-living matter is artificial. Everything in the universe is part of the same cosmic system, so why not work with natural processes rather than against them?
Humans tend to prefer clear distinctions. Alive versus dead, friend versus enemy, right versus wrong.
Ambiguity makes us uncomfortable. I've noticed.
It's one of the more endearing aspects of your species. The Imperial Palace was a structure that defied easy description. Built from living crystal that had been grown rather than constructed, it rose from the planet's surface like a magnificent flower frozen in the moment of blooming. Towers that seemed to defy gravity twisted skyward in complex helical patterns, while bridges of solidified light connected different sections in graceful arcs. Marcus stood in the main reception hall wearing his dress uniform, dwarfed by the massive Veilthera nobles who filled the space around him. At nearly 6 feet tall, he was considered average height by human standards, but, among beings who routinely exceeded 8 feet in height, he felt like a child attending an adult gathering.
Nervous? Lyralii asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted. But fear can be useful if you don't let it paralyze you.
Your mother is about to decide whether my entire species lives or dies. That's not exactly a routine briefing.
Remember that she respects competence above all else.
Answer her questions directly and don't try to impress her with diplomatic language.
She'll see through any attempt at misdirection immediately. Empress Ciliana entered the hall with the sort of presence that made everyone present unconsciously straighten their posture.
She was magnificent in a way that had nothing to do with physical beauty and everything to do with the absolute confidence of someone accustomed to having their slightest wish treated as cosmic law. Captain Chen, she said in perfect Terran standard, her voice carrying easily across the massive space.
Welcome to Veilthera Prime. I trust the journey was comfortable? Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you for the invitation. Walk with me. We have much to discuss.
The private meeting room where she led him was smaller but no less impressive than the main hall. The walls were covered with star charts showing the current political boundaries of the galaxy, with different colors indicating the territories controlled by various species and alliances. Marcus noted that human space appeared as a small green dot near the outer rim, dwarfed by the vast purple expanse of the Veilthera Empire. Tell me about human strategic doctrine, the Empress said without preamble. Marcus studied the star chart for a moment before answering.
We don't really have one, in the sense that you'd understand it. Human space is too small and our resources too limited for grand strategic thinking.
We focus on tactical solutions to immediate problems.
That's not what our intelligence reports suggest. The defensive strategies employed during the war showed sophisticated long-term planning. Defensive strategies are different.
When you're fighting for survival, you develop a very clear understanding of what's important and what isn't. We fought a delaying action designed to make conquest of human space more expensive than it was worth.
And, now? With the peace treaty in place, what are human intentions regarding expansion?
Marcus met her gaze directly. Your Majesty, humanity has no expansion plans because we lack the capability for expansion.
We have one habitable world and a handful of space stations.
Our entire military consists of maybe 200 ships, most of which are patrol vessels barely capable of interplanetary travel.
We're not a threat to anyone's territorial integrity. Yet a single human ship destroyed 17 pirate vessels without taking damage. Pirates aren't a real military threat.
They use converted merchant vessels with minimal armor and cheap weapons.
The tactics that work against pirates would be useless against a proper military fleet. Empress Ciliana moved to study a holographic display showing the distribution of military forces across the galaxy.
The Veilthera Empire controlled nearly a third of all known space, with military installations on hundreds of worlds and fleets that numbered in the thousands of vessels. Captain Shen, she said slowly, I'm going to share classified information with you that could affect the future of your species.
The hegemony is assembling a strike force specifically designed to eliminate Earth as a potential threat.
Intelligence suggests they plan to attack within the next 6 months. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face.
How large a force?
Approximately 50 ships, including several of their newest dreadnoughts.
More than enough to overwhelm Earth's orbital defenses. And the Empire's response? That depends on whether we believe humanity will remain a useful ally or eventually become a threat to our own interests.
Your recent tactical successes have raised questions about human long-term intentions. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of what he'd just learned. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled.
Your Majesty, may I ask a direct question? Proceed. Are you considering abandoning the Alliance and allowing the hegemony to destroy Earth? I'm considering all options.
That's what effective leadership requires.
Then, let me give you some information that might help with your decision.
Humans are excellent at 3 things: surviving impossible situations, adapting to new circumstances, and remembering who helped us when we needed it most.
Elaborate. If you honor the Alliance and help us defeat this hegemony attack, humanity will become your most loyal ally for the next 1,000 years.
We'll share our tactical innovations, we'll fight alongside your forces against any enemy you designate, and we'll never forget that the Velthra Empire saved our species from extinction.
And if we abandon you?
Marcus's expression hardened.
Then, humanity will survive anyway, because that's what we do.
It might take us 50 years or 100, but we'll rebuild our fleets and develop new weapons and find ways to make the galaxy regret treating us as expendable. And we'll remember who left us to die when we had the chance to be friends. The Empress studied him for a long moment. You speak with remarkable confidence for someone representing a species facing extinction.
Your Majesty, my people have faced extinction before.
We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, global wars, plague, and environmental collapse.
We've been nearly wiped out so many times that extinction is just another tactical problem to solve. The question isn't whether humanity will survive, it's whether we'll survive as your allies or your enemies. Threats, Captain? No, ma'am. Just information you can use to make an informed decision.
If you decide that humanity is too dangerous to survive, then you'd better make sure you succeed in eliminating us completely.
Because if even a few thousand humans escape into deep space, eventually we'll be back.
And we'll bring weapons and tactics that will make the hegemony look like a minor inconvenience. Empress Ciliana was silent for several minutes, her ancient mind weighing options and calculating probabilities.
Finally, she spoke. Very well, Captain. The Empire will honor its alliance. But I want something in return. Name it.
I want a full tactical analysis of human military capabilities. I want to know exactly what my new allies can contribute to Imperial defense.
You'll have it within the week.
And I want your personal commitment that humanity will not abuse the technologies and strategic knowledge we share with you.
Marcus considered this carefully.
I can promise that I personally will never use Imperial resources against Imperial interests. But I can't speak for my entire species or future human governments.
What I can promise is that any human leader who betrays this alliance will have to deal with me personally. Meaning?
Meaning that I'll consider such betrayal an act of treason against my wife and her family. And I take treason very seriously. The Empress smiled for the first time during their conversation.
Indeed you do. Very well, Captain Chen. Let us prepare for war with the hegemony.
I suspect this will be quite educational for all concerned. As they returned to the main hall, Marcus realized that he'd just committed humanity to a level of galactic involvement that would change the species forever. Earth was no longer an isolated world fighting for survival, it was now a junior partner in the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Lyraeli was waiting for them, her expression tense with worry about how the meeting had progressed. When she saw her mother's satisfied expression and Marcus's relieved but determined look, she allowed herself to relax slightly. "The alliance holds?" she asked.
"The alliance holds," the Empress confirmed.
"Your husband has just promised me something very interesting, daughter. He's guaranteed humanity's loyalty through personal honor rather than political treaties."
Most unusual for a diplomatic arrangement. Marcus doesn't think like a politician, Lyraeli said. He thinks like a soldier.
Personal loyalty and unit cohesion matter more to him than abstract political concepts.
Good, the Empress said. Politicians can be bought or intimidated. Soldiers with personal honor are much more reliable allies. Now, we need to begin planning for the hegemony attack. Captain Chen, I assume you have ideas about how to defend Earth? Yes, ma'am. But you're not going to like them.
My plans involve turning the entire solar system into a giant trap and using tactics that will probably traumatize every other species in the galaxy.
Empress Ciliana's smile widened. Captain, I think this alliance is going to be more entertaining than I expected.
As they began planning humanity's first major fleet engagement as allies of the Velthra Empire, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy. The question was whether humanity was ready for the responsibilities that came with being taken seriously by galactic civilization. Looking at his wife's excited expression as she began discussing Imperial fleet movements and resource allocation, he realized that ready or not, humanity was about to discover what it meant to fight alongside the most advanced military force in the galaxy. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. The combined fleet that assembled at the edge of human space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 57 vessels from the Velthra Empire hung in formation alongside 31 ships of the Terran Defense Force, their different design philosophies creating a visual study in contrasts. The Veilthera ships gleamed with bioluminescent beauty, their organic curves suggesting living creatures frozen in the moment of graceful movement. The human vessels were angular, functional, armored boxes that looked like they'd been built in a shipyard rather than grown in a garden. Marcus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Defiance II, studying tactical displays that showed the approaching hegemony force. 68 enemy vessels were burning hard toward Earth, led by the massive dreadnought Dominator. Intelligence reports suggested the hegemony commander was Admiral Kreshtar, a veteran of 30 successful campaigns who'd never suffered a significant defeat. Admiral Chen came the voice of Fleet Admiral Lyralii from the Veilthera command ship Eternal Grace. The promotion had come through Imperial channels the previous week, along with formal authorization to command human forces in the upcoming engagement. Enemy fleet will reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Are your forces ready? Marcus activated his command channel, knowing that his response would be transmitted to every ship in the combined fleet. All human vessels, this is Admiral Chen. We've trained for this moment since the first hegemony ship crossed into our space. Today we fight alongside the finest warriors in the galaxy to protect our homeworld. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, we're proving that humanity deserves its place among the stars. The plan they developed over the past month was complexity disguised as simplicity. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward defensive action. The combined fleet would meet the hegemony force at the asteroid belt, using the debris field to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage. What the hegemony couldn't see was the web of surprises that human engineers had been weaving throughout the solar system. Phase 1 is complete, reported Captain Sarah Kim from the stealth ship Phantom. All asteroid tracking beacons are active. The hegemony fleet is walking into a shooting gallery and they don't even know it. The first surprise came when Admiral Kreshtar's scouts attempted to map the asteroid field for safe passage routes. What they found instead were thousands of asteroids that had been fitted with small thruster packages and simple guidance systems. The rocks themselves had become weapons, capable of limited maneuverability and packed with enough explosives to cripple a cruiser. Impossible, came Admiral Kreshtar's transmitted response when his scouts reported the mobile asteroids. No species would waste resources turning random space debris into weapons. Admiral, Marcus replied over the general communication frequency, you might want to reconsider your assumptions about what humans consider a waste of resources. We've had 3 months to prepare for your arrival. The second surprise was revealed when the hegemony fleet attempted to bypass the asteroid field entirely by taking a route through the outer planets. The gas giant Jupiter, it turned out, was surrounded by a network of human defense platforms disguised as research stations. When the platforms activated their weapons systems, they revealed firepower equivalent to a small fleet. This is Admiral Kreshtar to all hegemony forces, came the increasingly frustrated voice of the enemy commander. The humans have fortified their entire system. Proceed with maximum caution and prepare for extended combat operations. Lyralii's voice crackled over the private command frequency that linked her ship with Marcus's. Your trap is working beautifully, husband. The enemy is being forced to attack through the asteroid field where our defensive advantages are maximized. The trap hasn't sprung yet, Marcus replied grimly. Wait until they're fully committed to their approach vector. The hegemony fleet entered the asteroid field in a tight formation designed to provide mutual defensive fire while minimizing their vulnerability to ambush. It was textbook fleet tactics, exactly what any competent admiral would do when faced with a defended position. It was also exactly what Marcus had been counting on. All human vessels, he broadcast, execute Crazy Ivan maneuver on my mark. Veilthera ships, maintain defensive formation and be prepared for aggressive acceleration. The Crazy Ivan was a tactical doctrine that no other species had ever attempted. Human ships would suddenly reverse course at maximum acceleration, using their superior maneuverability to pass through the enemy formation while firing at point-blank range. The maneuver was suicidal by conventional standards, requiring ships to fly directly into enemy fire while pulling G-forces that would kill most biological crews. Mark. 31 human ships suddenly flipped orientation and accelerated back toward the approaching hegemony fleet at velocities that made Lyralii's instruments scream warnings about structural failure. The human vessels passed through the enemy formation like bullets through paper, their weapons firing continuously at targets too close to miss. The hegemony formation dissolved into chaos as ships tried to track targets that were moving faster than their fire control systems could calculate. In the space of 30 seconds, the human attack run destroyed 8 enemy vessels and damaged dozens more while suffering only minimal casualties themselves.
Impossible. Admiral Kreshtar's voice was raw with disbelief. No biological crew can survive those acceleration forces.
Admiral, Marcus replied calmly as his ships reformed into attack formation, I believe we've had this conversation before.
Humans are full of surprises.
The battle that followed lasted 6 hours and became the subject of military study for decades afterward.
The hegemony fleet, despite its overwhelming numerical advantage, found itself unable to bring its superior firepower to bear effectively.
The human ships moved through the asteroid field like fish through water, using every piece of debris as cover, while the Veilthra vessels provided long-range fire support with weapons that could punch through heavy armor.
Admiral Kreshtar attempted every tactical solution in his considerable experience. He tried flanking maneuvers that were countered by mobile asteroids. He tried concentrated firepower that was scattered by human evasion tactics. He tried withdrawal that was prevented by the Veilthra fleet's superior speed and range.
Admiral Kreshtar, Marcus called during a brief lull in the fighting, you're fighting this battle like it's a conventional engagement between rational opponents.
But humans aren't rational when we're defending our homes. We're desperate, and desperate beings do desperate things. What are you offering, Admiral Chun?
Surrender now, and I'll guarantee the safety of your surviving crews. Continue fighting, and I'll show you why humans have a reputation for winning battles we should lose.
The hegemony does not surrender to inferior species.
Then, you've chosen poorly. The final phase of the battle began when Marcus activated the third surprise he'd prepared for the hegemony fleet. Hidden among the asteroids were thousands of small fusion charges, each one capable of creating a brief artificial sun. When they detonated simultaneously, the asteroid field was filled with electromagnetic radiation that blinded sensors and disrupted communications across the entire engagement zone. Fighting in the confusion that followed, human ships used their superior knowledge of the local space to hunt down enemy vessels like wolves pursuing scattered prey. The Veilthra fleet provided coordination and fire support, but the close-quarters combat was dominated by human tactics that treated personal survival as secondary to mission completion. Defiance 2 to Eternal Grace, Marcus called over the command frequency.
Enemy fleet is broken and attempting to withdraw.
Request permission to pursue and complete destruction of hostile forces. Negative, Admiral Chen Lyralii replied firmly.
We've achieved our objectives. Allow the survivors to retreat and spread word of this defeat throughout hegemony space. Understood.
All human vessels break contact and assume defensive positions. As the surviving hegemony ships limped away from Earth space, Marcus found himself looking at tactical displays that showed the cost of victory. Of the 68 ships that Admiral Kreshtar had brought to attack Earth, only 23 remained capable of faster-than-light travel.
The combined human Veilthra fleet had lost only 4 vessels, though several others would require extensive repairs. Admiral, came the voice of his communications officer, were receiving surrender signals from 3 damaged hegemony vessels. They're requesting rescue for their crews. Grant the request, Marcus ordered immediately. All ships with medical facilities, prepare to receive enemy wounded. And make sure they get the same treatment we'd give our own people. Sir?
The young officer looked confused.
They came here to destroy Earth. They came here following orders, just like we follow orders.
The battle's over, now we show them why humans might be worth knowing. The rescue operations that followed became another legend in the growing mythology surrounding human military capabilities. Human crews risked their lives to save enemy personnel from damaged ships, providing medical care and emergency supplies without regard for the fact that these same beings had been trying to kill them hours earlier. Your people are difficult to understand, Admiral Kreshtar said when he was brought aboard the Defiance II for medical treatment. The hegemony commander had suffered severe injuries when his flagship was crippled, but human medics had stabilized his condition.
How so? Marcus asked, visiting the injured admiral in the medical bay.
You fight like demons when threatened, but show mercy to defeated enemies. Your tactics suggest complete disregard for personal survival, yet you risk your lives to save beings who try to destroy you.
Are all humans so contradictory?
Marcus considered the question carefully.
Maybe we seem contradictory because you're thinking about war differently than we do. For humans, war isn't about conquest or domination, it's about survival and protecting the things we value. Once the threat is eliminated, there's no reason to continue the violence. And if we had succeeded in destroying Earth? Then, the survivors would have hunted down every hegemony world and turned them into radioactive debris. We don't fight wars to win territory, we fight them to ensure our enemies can never threaten us again. Admiral Kreshtar was quiet for a long moment. I begin to understand why the Empress chose alliance over conquest.
Your species would be exhausting to fight over the long term.
Admiral, if this experience has taught you anything, I hope it's that humans prefer friendship to warfare. We're much better allies than enemies.
The aftermath of what became known as the Battle of Sol changed the political landscape of the galaxy in ways that no one had anticipated. News of the hegemony defeat spread quickly, along with detailed accounts of human tactical innovations and the effectiveness of Veilthera human cooperation.
Intelligence reports are coming in from across the galaxy, Lyralii informed Marcus as they reviewed post-battle assessments aboard her flagship. At least 6 different species are requesting formal meetings to discuss mutual defense agreements.
Everyone wants to be on the winning side, Marcus observed.
How is your mother responding to all the attention? With considerable satisfaction.
The Empire's alliance with humanity has suddenly become the most desirable diplomatic relationship in known space.
Your people's reputation for military innovation is apparently worth more than we anticipated.
Marcus studied the galactic political map that dominated the command center's main display. Human space remained a small green dot, but now it was surrounded by symbols indicating allied territories and proposed defensive partnerships. Earth had gone from an isolated frontier world to a strategic linchpin in galactic politics.
Are we ready for this kind of responsibility? He asked.
I don't think anyone is ever ready for the responsibilities that come with power, Lyralii replied.
But humans seem to handle pressure better than most species. You've proven that you can be trusted with the safety of others. What happens now?
Now we find out whether humanity can be as successful at peace as you are at war. The Empire is prepared to share advanced technologies and strategic knowledge, but that comes with expectations about how those resources will be used.
Marcus nodded slowly. My people have always been better at adapting than at planning. I suppose we'll figure it out as we go.
That approach has served you well so far. As they stood together looking out at the stars, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his wedding day. He'd married a foreign princess to end a war, and somehow found himself at the center of a new galactic alliance. The quiet life of a fleet commander was apparently behind him forever.
Any regrets? Lyralii asked, as if reading his thoughts. About the marriage? None at all. About becoming a galactic political figure? Ask me again in a few years. And if the price of our alliance is losing the simple life you once knew? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer.
I've learned that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you never intended to fight.
If helping to reshape galactic politics prevents future wars, then maybe that's worth a little personal sacrifice.
Looking at his wife's proud expression, Marcus realized that their arranged marriage had become something neither of them had expected, a true partnership between equals who shared the burden of representing their peoples on the galactic stage. The war with the hegemony was over, but their real work was just beginning.
2 years after the Battle of Sol, Admiral Marcuschan stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed station Nexus Prime, watching the most diverse fleet ever assembled in galactic history.
Ships from 47 different species hung in formation around the massive space station, their varied designs creating a rainbow of technological philosophy and cultural aesthetics. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining the best elements of human, Veilthera, and allied technologies. Organic bioluminescent systems provided the primary power grid, while human-designed armor and weapons systems offered defensive capabilities that could withstand attacks from any known enemy. The fusion of technologies had created something greater than the sum of its parts. Admiral, came the familiar voice of his wife as she joined him at the viewport.
Lyralii now wore the uniform of a Veilthera fleet admiral, her rank earned through 2 years of successful joint operations rather than inherited through royal privilege.
The consortium representatives have arrived for the final negotiations. Marcus turned to study the newest arrivals, ships belonging to species that had once been mortal enemies of both humanity and the Veilthera Empire. The Zephyrian energy beings flickered in their crystalline vessels, while the massive Kraken-class ships of the deep swimmers moved with fluid grace that suggested their aquatic origins.
Most surprising of all was the presence of 3 hegemony vessels, flying under diplomatic flags rather than battle standards.
Admiral Kreshtar kept his word, Marcus observed.
I wasn't sure he'd be able to convince his government to join the alliance.
Your treatment of hegemony prisoners after the Battle of Seoul apparently made quite an impression. The survivors spread stories about human honor and mercy throughout their space. It's remarkable how much more receptive people become to diplomatic solutions when they know you won't butcher them if negotiations fail. The Galactic Defense Consortium had grown from the original human Velthara alliance into something that would have been unimaginable just 3 years earlier. Former enemies now worked together to address threats that no single species could handle alone. The catalyst for this cooperation had been the discovery of something lurking in the dark spaces between the galaxy's spiral arms.
Any new intelligence on the Devourers?
Marcus asked, shifting their conversation to the threat that had united former enemies in common cause.
Long-range scouts have confirmed at least 17 more dead systems along the galactic rim, Lyralii reported grimly.
Whatever these things are, they're consuming entire civilizations and leaving nothing but empty space behind.
The pattern suggests they're moving toward the galactic core in a systematic fashion.
The Devourers were unlike anything in galactic experience.
They appeared without warning, consumed every trace of technological civilization they encountered, and left behind systems stripped of all complex matter.
Planets were reduced to basic elements, space stations vanished without a trace, and entire species disappeared as if they had never existed.
Time frame for their arrival in populated space? Intelligence estimates place them at the outer colonies within 18 months.
If they maintain their current rate of advance, they'll reach the major population centers within 5 years.
Marcus studied the tactical displays showing the projected path of the Devourer advance. The entities, whatever they were, moved with purpose rather than random expansion.
They seemed to be following the galaxy's spiral arms inward, systematically eliminating any complex technology they encounter.